The Bible makes this really famous promise. Christians quote it all the time, that God will turn bad things into good things for those who are Christians. But really, in order to understand this, you've got to understand what he means by good. You've got to understand the difference between situational good and ultimate good. All right, let's just go ahead and start with the verse. It comes from Romans 8, verse 28. It says, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them." All right, so the idea here is that in the midst of a trial or a tragedy, and that really was the context of Romans chapter 8, in the midst of something that's bad in your life, that God can use a bad situation and turn it into good. But a lot of people think that that's talking about God will turn it into a good situation. And situational good is the good that is sort of short term. You know, it's the good that we like to think of as, hey, if I make more money, then that's a good situation. If I'm more healthy, then that's a good situation. If everybody's happy, then that's a good situation. Now, everybody likes to have situational good. We all love it. There's nothing wrong with having a nice house and having a nice car and all that kind of stuff. But the issue is this. What God is talking about in that passage is he's talking about ultimate good. He's not promising that you're going to have situational good in every bad situation in your life. So when you get sick, you're going to get healed if you're a Christian. So when you lose your job, you're going to get a better job if you're a Christian. So when you lose a relationship, you're going to have a better relationship if you're a Christian. That's not at all what he's talking about. And if you think that that's what this verse is talking about, then you're going to be disillusioned and you're going to get bitter at God. What God is talking about is something called ultimate good, big picture good. Now, a great personal example of that is when my daughter cut open her head and we had to bring her in to get stitches. So it was a bad situation. And then when she was getting poked and prodded by the doctor, it was an even worse situation. Now, my daughter was really little and she looked at me with those pleading eyes as if to say, how could you let this person do this thing to me? But see, she didn't have the big picture. We did. She didn't. She was only thinking about situational good. In that situation, it wasn't good because she was already in pain and the doctor was causing her even more pain. But see, we had something more ultimate in mind. We had the big picture in mind. And even though it broke our hearts to watch our daughter getting hurt by getting stitches, we knew that at the end of the day, it was a good thing. So here's the question. What is the ultimate good that God has in mind for us, even when we're going through trials and suffering? Well, it's not that you have more money, because really at the end of the day, God doesn't care that much about how much money you have or how big a house you have or anything like that. God has a much bigger picture in mind for you. God's desire for you and for me, for every pursuer of God, is that we be more like Jesus, is that we have a relationship with him that endures, that lasts in the long run. He doesn't really care so much about how comfortable we are in this life. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go sell your house or sell your car, but just know that that's not the ultimate good that he has in mind for you. So, for example, some people think, hey, if I have more money, then that's just really good, right? Well, no, because Jesus himself even said, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world financially and lose his soul? See, Jesus understood that there was a bigger good in mind than just having a lot of money or having a lot of health. So if the situation that you're in, if the trial that you're in, if it causes you to be more like Jesus, if it causes you to trust God more, if it causes you to draw closer to God, even in the midst of that suffering or the trial, then it is for your ultimate good. In fact, Romans 9:29, the very next verse after verse 28 says, "For God knew his people in advance, and he chose them to become like his Son." This is what God wants for you if you're a pursuer of God, is not to see your situation as a situation for God to bring in more situational good, but rather to see it as a situation to make you more like Jesus. So if in your situation, you can come out at the other side of it saying, I trusted God more in that situation. I became more like Jesus. I had a better perspective. I had a bigger perspective. I know that at the end of the day, all of this stuff is going to burn up and go away. But if my relationship with God is intact, if my pursuit of God is stronger as a result of that trial, then good happened. In fact, later in chapter 8, Paul writes this, "Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean that he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or are persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatened with death?" He says, "No, Despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loved us. Paul's not talking about temporary, situational victory there. He's talking about big picture victory. I don't know whatever struggle you're going through, whatever trial you're going through. If you're a follower of God, I encourage you to think about, how can I use this situation for the greatest good, for the ultimate big picture good? How can this trial draw me closer to the God that I know holds my future, the God that I know that I can trust to do good for me in all things?